think it's time for a lot of the doubters to begin writing their Tyler Herro apology letters. He's been awesome this year for the Heat, one of their most important players for sure, and definitely one of the driving forces for the hot start that they're out to. Coming off the bench for them currently, but he's still, 20th in the league in scoring. Next closest bench player, just to give you kind of some context for that, is Buddy Hield at 52nd. So you're talking about a 30-player difference in terms of points per game, and one of the top scorers in the league. To be top 20 is really good. Currently flirting with 50-40-90 club. For those who don't know, 50% field goal percentage overall, 40% on threes, and 90% free throws. Not something we see done very often at all. Steph Curry, obviously kind of a prime candidate for that. Larry Bird was a guy who had done it. But definitely not numbers we see hit very often. And if he doesn't get it this year, he's a little bit short of all three categories right now. But if he gets on a big run this year, I could definitely see him hitting that by the end of the year. But definitely at some point in his career, I just don't see how there would be a way that he would not make it. Currently, 21.8 points a game, 5.7 rebounds, 3.7 assists. The 2.9 turnovers you don't love to see. He can get a little loose with the ball, a little cute with it every now and then. Something I expect he'll clean up as his career progresses. He's still, I think, only 21 years old, maybe 22. Maybe he had a recent birthday, but, those numbers really great for third-year player. As I kind of mentioned, he's got to be in the mix for, most improved player this year. If he doesn't end up getting that, I've got to imagine he's the lead guy for sixth man of the year. And in a recent interview, interviewer kind of asked him where he saw his career going. He said, the interviewer had kind of mentioned, a lot of people saw him as a role player. I think those people are crazy at this point. And I do have the receipts to back it up that I felt this way about him. When we did our Eastern Conference preview, talked about last year, his struggles last year is kind of being a little bit more of a fluke, or at least, could chalk it up just to sophomore slump. It was a weird year for the Heat, and his struggles weren't a problem that was exclusive to him. Jimmy and Bam were really the only players that kind of, played really well last year. Everybody else kind of struggled or regressed to some degree, took a step back. Anyways, interviewer, asked him where he saw his career ending up. And he had kind of mentioned he expects to be, or would like to be, considered in with the Luka Doncic's, Trae Young's, John Morant's, particularly with the last two. The first two I mentioned, Luka Doncic and Trae Young. Those are the two that I've seen the most gripes about online in terms of, thinking Tyler Herro is delusional for wanting to be considered in with those two guys. I think that was kind of taken out of context for him a little bit. He was mentioning in a context if he wants to be considered, or consider himself to be kind of in that next group of guys who are in line to become the league's superstars, or the next set of superstars. So I don't know that he was directly saying he's as good as them, but that's kind of the way people took it. But anyways, we'll go there. Obviously not quite as good as Luka Doncic, Trae Young, putting it mildly, but I think it's closer than a lot of people are giving him credit for. I'll kind of start with the case against him, just because that's the most obvious and kind of the most boring. Case against him, I kind of mentioned he's being one of the most important players on the Heat. I think you can make the case for him being the third most important behind Bam and Jimmy. If you consider Kyle Lowry to be more important, if you look beyond his numbers, you could make the case for Herro being the fourth most important, while Trae Young and Luka Doncic are absolutely the faces of their franchise, no question. Particularly in Doncic's case, he's, really one of the only guys they got, it seems, some nights. And, as I mentioned, case against him, he's not been asked to carry the franchise like those guys. Those two, Trae got to the conference finals with his team last year, on a really nice run. And they had a shot at making the finals, a real shot. If he doesn't get hurt, who knows? I still think Milwaukee beats them, but definitely, at least had a puncher's chance of making the finals last year. Luka Doncic has gotten his team to the playoffs last 2 seasons, 2 out of 3 years for his career so far. This looks to be 3 out of 4 this year. And doing that in the West, particularly as a player as young as he is, and without a real complete roster or a lot of help, it's him and a lot of role players. Basically, he doesn't really have a clear cut number two player, or there's not a real clear pecking order beyond like Luka does everything for us. So just getting to the playoffs, even though he hasn't gotten out of the first round yet, real accomplishment there. The case for him, this is the most fun, I thought. Kind of mentioned the playoff success and, the fact that, Luka and Trae have had to carry their franchises. Well, they haven't carried them to as much success so far. Trae Young made his first playoffs last year. He did get to the conference finals, but still his first playoffs. Luka hasn't made it out of the first round yet. Well, Tyler Herro, on the other hand, made the playoffs last year. They did get swept, but they still made the playoffs. And then the prior year, when we were in the bubble, the Heat made a pretty miraculous run to the finals, toppling the number one seeded Milwaukee Bucks, and then, giving the Lakers, a bit of trouble. And especially when you factor in the injuries that they sustained during the finals, to take that series to 6, good accomplishment. I think they could have won had, Bam and Goran Dragic not gotten injured in that finals, but maybe not, probably not. Lakers were a really good team that year. And he was a big part of them making the finals. He had, particularly thinking about that game he had against Boston, if they don't win that game, and they certainly don't win that game without him, they may not win that series, but he had a huge night and carried them that night, and they got to the finals. He was still a big part of any success they had in the finals, so had a little bit more playoff success than those other two. And with this season in particular, his shooting percentage and shooting efficiency is across the board better than anything Trae Young or Luka Doncic are doing. Efficiency wise, he's, like I had kind of mentioned at the beginning of this video, turns the ball over a little bit more than you would like. His assist to turnover ratio, Trae Young is at 2.5 assists per turnover. Doncic 2 assists per turnover. Tyler Herro 1.3 per turnover. He's not asked to do as much passing and playmaking as those two are. So, and particularly as he gets older and, tightens up his game a little bit, I expect that, to be a better ratio. Here's the real interesting case. So while Doncic and Trae are really asked to kind of carry their franchise, and that's kind of been the case against Herro, I think you could also use that argument against them and for Herro, where he doesn't get the opportunities that those guys do. He doesn't get the usage rate touches that those guys do. And we might see similar numbers or even better numbers if his shooting percentages persist with more opportunities. We usually don't see that. Obviously the more shots you take, the less efficient you get typically. But I think the touch numbers, I looked at those, Luka getting about 91 touches per game. Each time he touches the ball, he has it for 6.3 seconds, and he has the ball for 9.5 minutes a game. Trae Young, 85 touches a game, 6 seconds every time he touches the ball, 8.5 minute time of possession per game. So, you're talking about these two basically have a little less than a quarter's worth of, basketball in their hands in terms of time. And they're holding on to the ball a lot more when they have it. Tyler Herro, 67 touches a game. So far less than what, 25 less than what Luka has, and, 20-ish less, 18-ish less touches per game than Trae Young. Only 4.27 seconds per touch. So the ball's moving out of his hands really quick, and 4.8 seconds of time of possession. So only about 5 minutes a game he has the ball versus, 9 for the other two if you average them together. So obviously just getting a lot less opportunities to really do stuff and really create off the dribble. Everything isn't running through him like it is for Trae Young and Luka Doncic. So if you put him in that type of situation, maybe we could see him as like a franchise carrying player. And then, just eye test wise, skill wise, Tyler Herro's got every shot. He's got everything you would want in a guard offensively. crafty finishes around the basket. I think he's an underrated athlete. We've seen him get the odd chase down block every now and again, and he can get up and dunk on people. So finishing around the basket has not been an issue for him. 3-point shooting, that's kind of what he's known for, but I think his skills go beyond that. I mean, he's got the step backs, the side steps on the threes, catch and shoot every shot there. Mid-range stuff, he can, pull up off of a screen and roll. He can, pump fake, go around the guy, pull up for the mid-range. He's got the floater game, finishes with both hands, or with either the left or the right around the basket. He's got the ball handling skill to take people off the dribble. I mean, he really does have everything offensively, all the tools, all the shots, kind of like CJ McCollum. I think that's a good comparison where, like, CJ doesn't do it every night, and neither does Tyler Herro in terms of the scoring production, but like there isn't anything you can point to offensively in his game that he doesn't have. Obviously, with time, we're hoping that becomes more consistent, the scoring wise, and he continues to refine those skills, but there's nothing missing from his game offensively. Kind of mentioned the turnover stuff. Sometimes he gets a little careless with the handle, or he gets a little too cute with some passes and turns the ball over. He'll learn that with time. That's nothing to worry about. Defensively, kind of like Trae Young and Luka Doncic, I think particularly with Doncic, he doesn't get picked on, at least narratively, as much as, Trae Young or Tyler Herro does for the defense. I think Herro is actually a pretty underrated defender. He's 6'5", and even in his rookie year, he was kind of frisky on that end. He really fought hard. He really gives a crap on defense, which is more than a lot of guys can say. I think Doncic really doesn't care as much on that end as the team probably needs him to. I think they're asking him to do way too much offensively, so it's not surprising that his defense is slacking. Trae Young, obviously everybody knows he kind of gets picked on and hunted. The teams are still hunting Herro offensively, but he's putting up a lot more of a fight this year, and it's not like a guaranteed easy basket. It's just he's kind of the obvious guy to hunt when you're looking at the other opposing team being the Heat. You got Jimmy Butler and Bam and Kyle Lowry, and it's just like, who else are we going to go after here offensively? So his defense is better than I think he kind of gets credit for. And I kind of mentioned the odd chase down block he gets every now and again. Rebounding wise too, I mean, better than Trae Young, obviously. I think he's definitely, nearly as good as Luka Doncic. I mean, 6 a game, and these aren't like, Luka will get some free rebounds just from his team kind of boxing out, and he just kind of walks to the ball. Russell Westbrook obviously gets a ton of those because everybody seems to kind of want to try and get him triple doubles. Tyler Herro doesn't get any of those rebounds. The Heat aren't out there trying to get Tyler Herro rebounds. He's having to battle for them, and he goes up and gets them. And, that's always been something that's been really impressive about his game. I think he might have been last season like the Heat's 3rd leading rebounder or 4th leading rebounder, which is crazy from a point guard or a guy that kind of viewed the way he is in terms of physicality. Currently, the last point I'm going to make here, tied for 7th right now in fourth quarter scoring at 6.4 points a game in the fourth. LeBron and Sekou Demboya were ahead of him on that list. So if you take them out, he's tied for 5th. Really, really impressive. LeBron's only played a handful of games. That's why I mentioned that. And I think Demboya on that list is only credited as having played 2 games. So I'm not really wanting to include him there. So we'll just say tied for 5th for him, which is about 1 point better than Doncic and about 1.5 points a game better than Trae Young. So he's a more viable, at least at this point in the season, fourth quarter scoring option than either of those two. As I mentioned, he's out there in the closing group for the Heat, and he's kind of the go-to guy offensively. It's him and Jimmy Butler, and he's scoring more in the fourth than Jimmy Butler, at least this season. So kind of just to recap everything, has definitely been having a breakout year. I think proving doubters of, last season's struggles wrong, of just chalking him up as a role player. He looks like a lot more than that. I'm just so thankful they did not trade him because it looked like there for a while the Heat were looking to move him or at least cash in for like a veteran all-star type level player. I think he's got all-star potential. I think it would be crazy to not see him in that light. He's still really young. So I'm hoping they wrap him up long-term. We continue to see him develop. And I think he definitely will be in the mix as one of the best, like, under 25 players in the league after this season and kind of going forward until he hits that age.